For those of you that don't know Opengear, and as Tom mentioned, we've been doing this for 13 years here. It's about a 20-year-old plus organization. We focus on IT and network management solutions. And about 20 years ago, founded to give remote serial console access, and we've just grown beyond that point. And we tend to use Tech Field Day as a way to come in, kind of give a peek behind the curtain of some things that we're thinking about, things that we're working on. It's all grounded on the Opengear platform. We build on top of production. What you're going to see today is building about 3 different AI agents to do different things. That's all on top of existing running code. About 9-ish weeks ago, I changed my focus. And if you guys remember, anyone that was here last year that looked at the Opengear presentation, we had the SEs come in. And that's because myself and my team were really heads down doing some operational things and getting some things out the door. And as we've kind of transitioned beyond that, I've come back, kind of poked my head up, so to speak, and started looking around. And the whole AI thing was out there, right? I mean, everybody hears the buzzword, et cetera, but I wasn't really paying that same level of attention to it that I probably really should have been. And when I took a look around, it was very eye-opening and frankly, a little bit terrifying, I got to say. And, we was working with Andy on, who'll be up here in a bit, to come up and work the technical side of the demo. And with one of the AI-assisted IDEs, right, coding tools. And one of them we tried, we weren't getting great results. He tries another one. I get a message from him on Sunday that goes, everyone should have this. About 15 minutes later, I get another message that says, we're all going to be out of our jobs. Now, what we've actually found out is someone with that level of experience who's, been a chief architect, layer 2 through 7 at Spirent, places like that, it just makes them way more efficient, probably 10x more productive in reality, which does open up a lot of questions about, what happens with very junior people. How do you get up the career ladder? You see a lot of that in the press today as well. And so one of the things that always runs through my head with something like this is the old REM song, "It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine." And it's like, yeah, I don't know how fine I actually feel here with some of what we're starting to see, because I do think there's going to be some big societal impacts as a result. You look at the business process outsourcing firms in India, for example, a lot of what I was just talking about can replace those kind of lower level programmers that are just kind of writing code, as well, call center operations out of the Philippines. So there's definitely those things are all really happening. But as we look at, how do you make an agent, where do you go with it? One of the things they need, of course, is contextual data. And how do you get contextual data? And as we started playing around with these more in a network sense, looking at how we could actually do that, how we could facilitate that, kind of building off of the Opengear platform at the end of the day. And because we connect into, virtually anything, that could be sensors, that could be, a serial port on a switch, that could be, a management port on a server, right? So all of those different things give us the ability to pull data in, very contextual data, as well as push control back out in certain instances. So this is my nod to Las Vegas, by the way, right? So, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens, in a silo stays in a silo. And so much of what we do as businesses is we tend to put, our data into different systems. And that system has a different login. It has different access controls. You've got a jungle of different ticketing systems. Logs go one place, something else goes another place. And all of that ends up, in a different data silo. And at the end of the day, I think it was NVIDIA that turns this an AI factory, right? You got to be able to take the data in, you basically process it, and you get intelligence out the other side. Well, if you're only feeding it something that's coming out of one of those silos, call it security, or maybe it's coming off the kind of OT side of the house, right? Some kind of an ops thing, then that's all you're going to get out. You'll end up with a very, siloed agent that can do a very specific thing. And I think, from an agent perspective itself, we don't want them to be, kind of the omnipresent thing that's going to be able to take over, obviously. The more narrow their capability set is, the less risk associated with them. But you can't get to true intelligence until you really break those silos down. And that's one of the things that, this kind of new platform starts to lead to. It was earlier this year, and I don't know how many of you have seen this, but it was in February, that Microsoft CEO came out and said SaaS is dead. All a SaaS application is It's a fancy UI sitting on top of some static business logic that interacts with your data, performs a CRUD operation. He's like, it's dead. About 4-ish weeks ago in a podcast interview, Mark Benioff really kind of acknowledged the same thing. He was talking about their existing SaaS applications, and then he got into Agentforce and how this is going to enable, digital labor, which is going to be this multi-trillion-dollar market, right? So he's kind of painting that picture, but really saying the same thing. And I think if you look around, in the networking arena, there's a ton of different SaaS applications that do different things, whether that's a DSIM, to different observation type tools. They're all really SaaS applications at the end of the day. You've got a kind of static layer of business logic with some kind of fancy UI that sits up on top of it. And I think, this will break out different ways. If you look at something like Salesforce, they got a ton of data regarding, customers in some way. That could be your CRM data from a sales perspective, could be support, and they may end up kind of looking like a walled garden, almost like the Apple of agentic AI. They take that data, they kind of consume that inside. Something that Cisco could do, take all your apps, Dynamic, your Splunk, all of that data, that's a great set. Take your CCIE program as a way to basically say, this is the knowledge this thing should have, and you could make a digital CCIE. You could rent that, great model. But again, how useful is that without your contextual data of what that means coming off of your infrastructure, whether that's at the facilities layer or whether it's coming up the stack. So looking at what happens if SaaS is dead, and on the left side of the slide is your SaaS application. And every good SaaS product manager has a metric. It's called engagement. It's to keep you engaged in that platform. They're measuring, how much clicking are you basically doing? And so you can look at these things as almost a way to keep you engaged like that, and you feel productive as a result. And sit on top, away you go. Well, if you replace that with an agent, what happens? The agent sits on top, but now you've got this new data perimeter that's exposed. And that's really where all of the proprietary content of a business is. It's in your domain knowledge. And how do you secure that? How do you enable that? And those two key things, I think, are super important to being able to really enable, agentic or, digital labor, if you will. And so how do you build that perimeter security? How do you give it the context that it needs without allowing leakage? Because if you allow that to leak, then your proprietary, differentiating data just leaked as well. So I'm going to step back for just a second. And most of you in the room, I would assume, know what an agent is. There's really several generations of these things. We were laughing earlier at whatever the agent had responded as far as some tasting notes as well. But your general GTP type interface is an agent. It's just a Gen 1 agent. You go in there, human, you put a query into it, it's a one and done. You could go in and go, hey, give me a sample config for, ISIS for this type of thing. It'll spit something out. No real context beyond that. You'll get into your Gen 2 agents. This is maybe a depiction a little bit more of what a Gen 2 could look like, because you're starting to bring in other things, right? You're bringing in outside data retrieval, you're putting outside tools into play, that human in the feedback loop that can help control decisions. And with a Gen 2 agent, they're a lot more kind of like agentic assistants. And they're the kind of like I would see inside of the IDE type tools, where you can put together a framework, you can have it do kind of pick and shovel work, if you will, to develop software code for you. And then you get to Gen 3. And if you kind of read in the common industry, I think these will start to appear probably somewhere around 2027. And that's really where the agent, if you will, is working in that outer loop. You can give it a very generic description to go do something, and then it can take action. And that's really where you need to be able to bring all the different contextual data together as well. And you can make those workflows kind of as complex as you need to do them to hook different things together. Most of the agents we're showing in here today are fairly simple, where we're taking some amount of input, vectorizing that, putting that into a different large language model. And one of the things we found, and we were having a bit of a discussion before this started, different large language models will give you different results. It's kind of like horses for courses. We found certain ones, will work better at analyzing log data. Certain ones are better at doing other tasks. And so you can kind of manipulate that as needed from an agent perspective. So looking back to, okay, what did it actually take to get one of those Gen 3 agents to work? The first thing we were talking about is being able to pull all of your data in, pull that into some kind of a store, get it in the right format, put access control onto it so the agent can get there. Basically that context firewall, if you want to call it that. The agent can now has the knowledge to do something, but then you need access control again. If you'd built some kind of an agent, let's say to do FP&A analysis for you, that thing should not have access to storage, shouldn't have access to network. And so, just like different roles that you have inside of an organization, these things will have to have the same thing. And then you need that control loop or that feedback loop. And I think this is where, the world of simulation, digital twins, et cetera, can sit in there to help really train what's going to happen on the other side. Now, on the left side of this equation, in November of 24, Anthropic released MCP, or the Model Context Protocol. And what it is built to do is to try to take disparate data sources and normalize those so that an agent can ingest them. So back to my finance example, if I wanted to pull something, from public financial data, I could make an MCP server, put that in front of Yahoo Finance, pull that now in. I could get some kind of report out the other side. So any place that you would want to pull data from, you would put an MCP server, and it's really just a, client server type protocol. They didn't take security into consideration when they first developed this. Now they're working on it. They're working on it quickly and hard, but there are some difficult problems that still need to be addressed. They're not simple ones, which is, how do you determine the identity in a distributed system of each one of those MCP servers so that you can't put a rogue server in there and inject fake context or whatever it is to corrupt the whole system? So that's one of the keys. Right now, the protocol itself is, not encrypted in flight either. So you've got to deal with getting that encrypted. So there's a number of things like that that they'll be working through, and they are working on, kind of as a larger community. About the same time, Google put out their agent-to-agent protocol to be able to get an ecosystem of agents to work together. There's some super interesting concepts inside of it, which is your agent capability card. It's almost like a resume if you wanted to use that analogy. Here's the skill sets that I have as an agent. Of course, that allows you to be able to use those to be able to put other controls on. So there's a lot that's going on from a protocol perspective, but to really build what we need, I do think we need really a new platform to be able to pull this off. And this is a little bit more, kind of IT and OT specific, but I think you could make it more generic for business in general. In this particular case, that lower level down there is a place where, we as Opengear have historically played, whether that be sensors, whether that be telemetry, or whether that be the management side of this. Now, prototypically, coming in from Serial Console, it's on the far right of that where the console server would go in. That's great. We're connected. We can pull data out. We can push control back down. But likewise, we do pull telemetry up from our connected devices, and oftentimes sensors are in there as well. And that could be power, that could be environmental, dry sensor, door open, door close, those kinds of things. And that next layer up, or that independent data management path, is what we call the smart management fabric at Opengear. And so it's a way to connect all of that. It's kind of an overlay of fabric, if you will, from a management perspective, and then being able to put controls on top of that to say that this particular entity can only do these things down through the management fabric. Database on top, what you'll see today is what we call the connected resource catalog, to be able to get all of your inventory data, et cetera. And then sitting on top of that is really your identity management layer that's coming in, and then plugging agents on top of it. And what it does is it allows you to secure that data perimeter, that contextual perimeter. It gives you the ability to put some governance around it on what agent can do what human can do what level of access can you get where. And those are the things that we need to do, I think, to really enable AI operations at the end of the day. With that, what I'm going to do is we're going to turn this over to the technical side of the demo with that intro, and come up. So Andrew Pierce, or Andy Pierce, is our chief architect, and Matt Whitmer is solution engineering for us. And like I said earlier, we tend to use these as a way to get some feedback on things that we're looking at going forward, exact dates, et cetera. So it's a bit of a view into our roadmap the product management team can get into offline if they want to, as far as, dates or when something like that could come into play. But it is built, 100% on existing Opengear platform, running, production code. We're just really using sometimes what I call our agentic UX to be able to do this stuff on top of. And it really comes back to, I think, core Opengear. It's in the name of the organization, that openness, that ability to get into the solution, to extract things or to push things into it so that you're not dealing with a closed system in some way.